I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. In today's episode, I'm so excited to chat with author T.J. Alexander to talk about their holiday romance novel, Second Chances in Newport Stephen. In Second Chances in Newport Stephen, a trans man returns to his Florida hometown for Christmas after his career goes up in flames. He is hoping the move is temporary until he finds a new writing job. But when he crosses paths with his childhood best friend, who also happens to be his high school ex-boyfriend, things start to get complicated. Readers, this was a super funny and super steamy holiday romance that I was really excited to read because it was set in Florida. And I know I'm stating the obvious, but people don't think of Florida when you think about the holiday season because, let's be real, it's all sun, sand, and sea down here, and none of the cozy, snow falling outside, gathering around the fire vibes that people normally think about when they think of the holiday season. So, in this episode, in addition to talking about their new book, TJ and I talked about family holiday traditions, and I loved hearing about those very only Florida traditions that TJ shares, which includes a paper-thin Santa Claus. Trust me, it's wild. But we also get some great book recommendations too, and sneak peeks into their upcoming books as well. But before we get into the episode, please, pretty please, leave the podcast a 5-star rating. Write me a review if you love the show, and share this episode or any of your favorite episodes with your bookish friends. It really helps the show. It costs nothing, and it keeps me and the podcast and just all the content I create going. So thanks in advance. And now let's get into the episode with author T.J. Alexander. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and today I'm so excited to have on the couch with me TJ Alexander to talk about their new book, Second Chances in Newport Stephen. TJ, welcome to the Reader's Couch.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay, I'm so excited. Really enjoyed this one. But before we even get into the book, I want to know how you're feeling. I know this isn't your first rodeo, but Second Chances in Newport Stephen will be out there in the world. Readers can get their hands on a copy. Hopefully they enjoy it as much as I do. But how are you feeling now that this book is out there in the world?
Wow. So I have not let myself think about it, to be honest. Yeah, it is my third book. It's my second book that's coming out this year alone. And yeah, I think that the best thing for me personally in dealing with the sort of anxiety that happens around pub day is just to try and forget that it's happening. Like I'm very lucky to be busy. Have, currently like edits that I need to do for other books. I need to finish other drafts. I have lots of stuff that I can focus my attention on because at this point I've done all I can. I can't. It's not my job to do anything more on this book, to be honest. Like everything else is up to somebody else, somebody who's really good. Selling a book. So yeah, I'm just trying not to think about it.
Trying not to think about it. You know what? I think lots of folks on here can relate, especially people like me who tend to get a bit anxious at times. So anxiety sometimes takes over, even though we're excited and we're happy about it. So yes, all good things, all good things. So TJ, I want readers to hear straight from you before I kind of start to dissect the book a little. Tell us about Second Chances in Newport Stephen and what can readers expect when they pick up a copy? What's your elevator pitch, essentially?
All right. The elevator pitch is a trans man on the cusp of 40 returns to his small town, Floridian hometown around the holidays and ends up reconnecting with his first love, his high school ex-boyfriend.
Ooh, we love a reconnection, a second chance romance, which it also says in the title, so not much of a spoiler there. I have to tell you, when I picked up an early copy of this book, which I received, and I got cozy and comfy on the couch, my husband's always reading the book covers or peering on my Kindle to see, what are you reading this time?
Mm-hmm.
Or just genuinely asking questions. I was like, oh, I'm reading actually a book set in Florida, where he is from. He grew up in Florida. We live here now. And I said, it's Second Chances in Newport Stephen. I have to tell you, his first reaction was, Newport Stephen? Where's that? I know Newport Richie. So I have to ask, was this based? First of all, let's just get the names and titles and everything out the way. We know it's a second chance romance, but I want to know, is this based on a real Florida town, Newport Stephen, Newport Richie, Newport other things? Tell me about it.
Newport Stephen is a fictional town that is legally distinct from every Florida town that you know, that anyone might know. But yeah, I grew up in South Florida, and it is definitely influenced by my own hometown. It's just an amalgamation, I think, of a lot of suburban, coastal, small towns in South Florida. I hope that my love-hate relationship with my hometown comes through in this. But yeah, it's not a real place. It's definitely a made-up fictional place where everything my characters need is right there within driving distance. It is not real at all.
Well, you know what? These characters deserve it, okay? They don't need to be driving 2 hours one way to get anything of service. And they also can just have everything within walking distance and just have their utopia. I think they deserve that. So
Exactly. And also driving in books is not fun to write about. It's not fun to read. So like if I was going to make this completely 100% the South Florida realistic experience, it would be mostly driving on the turnpike. So like, we don't need that. Who needs that?
We do not need that. Trust me.
No.
I'm still here living it. We don't need that. So anyways, let's talk about our characters. So Eli decides to rent out his apartment, return home to his hometown, his parents' home in Florida. In his mind, he's hoping that this will be temporary. He's hoping to get another writing gig. So he's going back home to kind of, weather the I don't have a job right now storm. Tell us about your character, Eli, who he is as a person, and, what he's going through prior to arriving back in Florida.
Sure. So, like many of my book characters, Eli's hit a rough patch in his career. He's lost his job. He's a comedy writer for a fictional sitcom. And he's sort of struggling. He comes back to his hometown for the holidays. And it's sort of a secret that he's keeping from his family that he doesn't have a job back in New York where he is supposed to be. And he's just sort of in a weird place in his life where he's not sure what's next and things are really up in the air. And this is also all like, his feelings of kind of slinking back home in defeat are also compounded by the fact that he is, a trans man who has only relatively recently in his life come out and come to terms with that and transitioned. And, Florida is not the greatest. It's not the best place to be trans right now. So that's where Eli is at the beginning of the book.
Absolutely. And when he arrives home, like you said, he runs into his childhood best friend, who also happens to be an ex, who also happens to be high school sweetheart, first love, all those good things. Obviously, running into Nick makes things complicated. Now, I have to say, I liked the dynamics surrounding Nick because Nick is a divorced father, Nick has a young child, and also just kind of connecting back with Eli, who, like you mentioned, is now out, who has now transitioned, who has come to terms with everything. So these two folks are connecting. Before we get into the connection of it, tell us about Nick. I enjoyed Nick's character, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, that's my boy. Nick is my favorite of all the boys. Yeah, Nick is Eli's ex and also his, childhood best friend. They grew up together. They haven't spoken in a very long time, ever since, they graduated from high school and lost touch and broke up. And Nick is he's just the nicest guy. I realized early on in writing this book that if I was writing a story about, these two men who reconnect and rekindle what they had, their old friendship and in some ways their old romance, that Nick was going to have to be a real special guy, and he's my special little guy. He's just he's he's just the person that you would want to go to when bad things are happening in your life. So when Eli finds him again, it's just, for them it's just this perfect moment. And yeah, I could talk about Nick forever. He was my surprise in this book of realizing like, oh, I want to spend more time with this guy. So yeah, I soon learned in writing the first couple drafts that like, oh, this is going to have to be equal between them. It's my first dual point of view book. We switch between Eli and Nick telling the story, or switch between like things happening from their perspective. And that's because I just loved Nick so much. I just thought he was so great. He was just like a chill guy who just is trying to do the right thing always. His heart is always in the right place. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love hearing that you love Nick, because I really, really gravitated towards him, and I loved him very much. But I also love a good friend of, okay? Because we always have our main characters, but we need our friends of. And for me, I loved Margot. So
Yes.
tell our listeners just a little about Margot. And yeah, I gravitated to Margot so much.
Margot is Eli's best friend. We love a best friend. We need them around in rom-coms so that our heroes have someone to talk to about how they're feeling, about their big feelings. Margot was sort of the person who took Eli under her wing when he was first starting out in the comedy world. She is loosely based on the brilliant and fantastically funny comedian Judy Gold, who I grew up watching, Comedy Central specials of her and just like wanting to be her friend, wanting to sit in a room, when I was like 13 and talk to this woman who was just funnier than anyone I'd ever seen in my life. And yeah, Margot is the one who's kind of pushing Eli to concentrate on his career and figure out what he's doing with that, and maybe stop being so obsessed with boys. she's kind of the voice of reason in a lot of ways, but she's also the voice of like, daydreaming and shooting for the sun and telling Eli that like his life is not over just because he's hit this roadblock. And I really love how her B plot unfolds in the book, because it drives a lot of what is happening between Nick and Eli into, dot dot dot, and then things happen.
Yes, exactly. And Margot is actually very funny, and I love that. Margot just has this witty personality. I was here for it. Nick's my number one guy, but Margot is my number two girl.
No, I love her so much. I was very glad that, early on, my early readers and my agent and my editor were like, more Margot. And I was like, absolutely, yes. Those are notes that I love to hear.
Yes. I love that. I'm glad to hear that they also kind of recognize that, Margot's something quite special, and kind of have more of her in the book as well. So I know we talked about like setting in terms of, okay, Newport Stephen is just, a combination of all these coastal South Florida towns. But like you also said, Florida is just not the best place to be if you're queer, and especially if you're trans. Tell me about choosing Florida. And I know it's your hometown too, but choosing Florida as a setting for this second chance romance with this newly transitioned Eli, with Nick, who is also realizing that he's not straight after all, which, just a side note mention, loved Eli's ex-wife and father, they were quite supportive with this as well. And I love reading that in a book. I'm like, thank you, because the world outside is kind of pretty scary. So at least in this book, I know they're okay. But tell me about choosing to come to Florida, giving the real world politics of Florida right now, and just how unsafe it is for folks like Eli and Nick.
Yeah, I think that, I really didn't have a choice really when it came to writing this book, because this book is about going home and all the sort of weird feelings that are wrapped up in it. And also, from Nick's perspective, the story is about, staying home. He's the one who kind of stayed behind in their hometown after Eli left. And I think that, I was talking to my brother about this recently. We both left Florida pretty much the minute that we could, as soon as we graduated from high school. So very similar to, Eli's trajectory. And we were talking about how we both kind of had this in the back of our mind, this kind of survivor's guilt about, the friends that didn't, come out with us out of the state, not just like come out of the closet, but like, leave that place. Because it, even if you're not queer, it's incredibly unforgiving and stifling to, people of color. Nick is a Taiwanese American man. And the reason that he had to be Taiwanese American in this story was because I was sort of thinking like, okay, what kinds of things, not, absolute one-to-one, obviously, but what kinds of things could Nick have experienced in his life that are similar to what Eli has experienced? And the idea of, the vanishingly small number of trans people that live in Florida, compared to the rest of the population, are very similar to the small, number of people who are East Asian who live in Florida. So I wanted there to be some kind of, the setting needed to be a place where they could connect over feeling like, oh, I'm the other, I'm somebody who is not welcome here and is never thought of when you think of this place. So yeah, it had to be Florida, not just because that's where I'm from and where I grew up, but it was because that's what the story was about. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get to see if they decide if a life in Florida is, the place for them and the place to be. So yes, but I loved Eli and Nick and Margot. They're my people, and I really enjoyed this one. Also, another thing is when folks think of holiday themed books, because this is a queer holiday romance, make no mistake about it. People don't normally think of Florida at all. So
no.
It's not the place. And being here, being in Florida, it feels like we're often discounted with all, versions of things and how we decorate and maybe traditions we have down here. You're going to see Santa Clauses surfing. You're going to see sandmen on the beaches, sandman, not snowman, kind of vibes. So yes, people don't think of Florida, so I appreciated it being set here. So I kind of want to get into some holiday traditions with you to kind of see what does a holiday for TJ, especially one in Florida, but also elsewhere, looks like. So
sure.
Tell me about any just personal traditions that you have or that you think of around the holiday season, but also, in addition to personal traditions, what are some very Florida traditions that you
sure.
love?
So I was raised Catholic. I'm still recovering. Don't worry about me. I'm fine now. But I was raised pretty religious. Christmas wasn't the big deal for us. It wasn't. It was one of the big ones, but not the biggest one. So for me, Christmas was always a little bit of a letdown, I think, because for us, it just meant like going to church a little bit more often. But but yeah, I also have a birthday right around Christmas. I'm a Sagittarius.
Ooh.
And, being the kind of kid who always wanted attention, and then, Jesus Christ kind of swoops in and takes all of your thunder around like your big day. Yeah, Christmas to me was always like a little bit bittersweet, a little bit of a bummer. And also, growing up in Florida where there is no snow, there is no, reindeer, there's no giant pine trees, for a Christmas tree kind of thing. It just sort of, I think, reinforced the kind of letdown feel that Christmas always had for me personally. I don't mind getting in the Christmas spirit, really, honestly, now that I'm an adult. But yeah, I think a lot of my sort of wishy-washy feelings about Christmas come out in this book, where it's just sort of like, oh, Florida's already so goddamn weird, and now like we all have to pretend that it's snowing when it's not.
Because it's not.
Yeah, because it's just not. But I think as far as like Floridian traditions, there was one that I remember. They probably don't do this anymore in South Florida, but they used to do this thing when I was a kid, where like a local like newspaper or something like that would rent a snow machine, like it would make snow, quote unquote, and the neighborhood kids or the kids in the town would gather in like, the parking lot of a strip mall so that they could play in the snow. But it was actually just like, an 8x8 foot just square of just ice. It was just an ice machine. It was very painful, if I'm remembering correctly. You couldn't really make snowballs or snowmen or anything. It was just like you were just digging your bare hands in what was essentially crushed ice, while your parents took photos. I remember that really clearly. And what else? There is like one little brief mention in the book. Yeah, Nick does have a daughter. He's divorced and he has a small child, and he's trying to do like all the fun kiddie Christmas stuff with her.
Yeah.
And she mentions that like Santa doesn't come down the chimney because obviously in Florida you don't have chimneys. He has to like, get in other ways. And I think when I was a kid, the rumor was that he slid under doors. Like he got really thin, like a piece of paper, and slid under doors, which now that I think about it is absolutely unhinged. Like you couldn't come up with anything else that was like less weird than that. But that was sort of the elementary school goss that was going around when I was Zoe's age. So yeah. That was a brief allusion to that in the book.
Oh my gosh. I do. When you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that bit. And I was saying out loud, because I'm that person who talks to my books, I'm that weirdo. But I was saying, no, he comes in through the sliding door because...
Yeah, okay. Because there's sliding door. Everyone's got a sliding door. It's never locked because it's
never
the 80s.
locked. Exactly.
Yeah. No, totally. I do remember asking about the sliding door because, it was never locked and that would be probably the easiest for him. But I think my parents didn't want me to get like intruder vibes from Santa Claus. I don't think they wanted me to be afraid of him, essentially doing a B&E on our house. So I think that's why the thin paper, lie stuck with me.
Okay. We'll work with that. But yeah, I remember saying out loud, no, he comes in through the sliding door. And it just so happens I set up our Christmas tree in the back corner of one part of the sliding door that never, we don't open that side. We open the other one. But yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, so real. Okay. Let's talk about food traditions. What food do you think about when you think about the holiday season?
I mean, my family was kind of a big like casserole and jello salad family.
Ooh.
So same for any big holiday, just like a lot of jello salads. Not particularly good. As far as food, I would say not particularly good. And also like we worked in a restaurant. My parents owned a small, family restaurant that I worked at from a very young age. It's a huge influence for the restaurant that Nick works at in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, like, we were busy cooking for other people.
Other families. Yeah.
We were working on all the big holidays. So I don't have a ton of, like, except when I was very, very small, I don't have a ton of, like, big, family meal where everyone's there kind of memories.
Yeah, I get that.
That just wasn't happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Any desserts or sweet treats or puddings or anything that you have at Christmas that you wouldn't have any other time?
Well, that was our key lime pie time, which is a very Floridian thing.
Yes.
My parents had very, and they still do, have very strict opinions about key lime pie. It has to be made with a certain brand of key lime juice. It can't be made with regular lime juice.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lie. That
Blasphemy.
Yeah, that's blasphemy. So that's what I would always eat, like a huge quarter of a pie, just a giant thing of citrus custard. Nothing better than that.
Well, I tell you, that's the one thing I've adopted here. I love me a good key lime pie. Yes,
it's so good.
So good. What holiday movies are on your playlist during the season?
Ooh, okay. So we're not a Wonderful Life household or anything like that. I think it's mostly Die Hard.
Ooh. I like it.
If it's December, we're watching Die Hard at least once or twice. It's a classic movie, and I know it's not technically a Christmas movie, but like the reason for the season is there, right? You're in an impossible situation and you're just trying to survive, which I think a lot of people's Christmas and holiday experience is a huge mirror for. So yeah, I'm a diehard girly, gender neutral.
You heard it here, folks. TJ, Die Hard, holiday season. Watching it at least once or twice. So you heard it here first. Okay. Last one. What holiday themed books do you think about or have you read that you just absolutely loved and you're like, yes, if you haven't read this yet, you should read this and add this to your holiday list? Or even if you have a childhood recommendation that you remembered, growing up in terms of holiday themed books.
Okay, well, as an adult, this is definitely not a childhood pick, but as an adult, the last couple years, I've very much enjoyed Alison Cochran's "Kiss Her Once for Me." I believe it came out last Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful sapphic love story. And I've also enjoyed Timothy Javansky's "You're a Mean One, Matthew Prince," which is kind of a gay love story, small town Christmas love story that sort of plays on the Grinch trope of our hero needs to learn the true meaning of Christmas sort of thing. Loved that. I think as a kid, I remember my mom always reading us like a lot of Sherlock Holmes, which isn't very Christmassy. I don't think there was like a Sherlock Holmes.
No. I think it is. I think Sherlock Holmes actually screams Christmas, just like Dickens.
Yes, it is that similar, like Victorian, everyone's wearing a weird hat kind of thing. It does feel very Christmassy. It feels like anyone could, start singing a carol at any moment.
Yes.
Oh, and there was the one about the goose. That was a Christmas mystery where they had to figure out the goose who had eaten the blue carbuncle. I think that was a Christmas story because that was a Christmas goose.
Sherlock Holmes and the Case of the Christmas Goose. I remember that one.
I think it was named something else, but you know what I mean. That's the sort of thing that we would read. Our household was really nerdy. It was really not, we didn't have we didn't have snow, obviously, and we didn't have a lot of like things happening in town. So there's a part in Second Chances for Newport Stephen where there's a local Christmas light show that is happening, and that was like almost unbelievable that I daydreamed that up, because if we had something like that in my hometown during Christmas, like forget about it. It would be all we were talking about for months. Like there was never anything so exciting as that. So we had to make our own fun.
I like that though. I really, really enjoyed that. And I legit just pulled my Arthur Conan Doyle off the shelf and I'm like, what story is this? Because I have to find out this Christmas Goose story because I know it.
It's the Blue Carbuncle, I think it's called.
Yes,
Because
that's it.
the goose swallows it, and the man who ends up buying and cooking the Christmas goose finds it, and he's like, "Oh, Sherlock Holmes, we should probably figure out where this came from." And it's like a fun little romp.
That's it. No, you're absolutely right. That's the one. The Christmas Goose, I think that was a play.
Oh,
I think they made I think the Sherlock Holmes and Christmas Goose, I think that was a play. Anywho, but yes, I am here for Sherlock Holmes. I am here for Dickens, Arthur Conan Doyle. Yeah, it's the time, it's the vibe. So I think that's a perfect fit. So getting back to books, your previous books, so the first one, Chef's Kiss, which I absolutely adored. Chef's Choice was just as good. This third one was oddly different because, again, when I saw Second Chances in Newport Stephen, I'm like, TJ Alexander, you sure? Wait.
yeah.
I was expecting another chef's book, if I'm being completely honest. Tell me about the change.
Well, my publisher made me. No. I mean, the first two books that I wrote were linked. They were part of a loose duology, is I think what we're calling them. And I would love to return to that universe at some point, someday, maybe. Who knows? That's not up to me though. That's up to Mr. Simon and Schuster and their business decisions. And so when it came time to sort of pitch new ideas to my editor, this was a book that I wanted to tell, and I knew it was going to be a departure. I knew it wasn't going to be a quote unquote foodie rom-com like the last two had been. There's some food because Nick works at a restaurant and it's the holidays, so holiday food is happening, but it's definitely not the same universe. In my mind, they're the same universe, but it takes place in a different state. It's all new characters. It's a completely different world in terms of that. But it was also one of those things that I really wanted to do, and I thought, if they're up for it, I'm up for it. And I was very lucky that they were they were all up for it. And even though it doesn't have the food backstory sort of driving the plot like the first two books do, I think there's a lot of things that are similar that people who loved the first couple books that I wrote will find fun in this book. It's a lot of zany, silly things happening. It's lovable characters. It's a lot of emotional kind of growth for our heroes and that kind of thing. And I think that my editor and my publisher were just very excited to have, I think, the highest concentration of tropes that one book could possibly have. They were like, so it's holiday, and it's a second chance, and it's queer, and it's it's all. It was just all these things, and I guess that's that is exciting. So
oh yeah. It is exciting, and it was exciting for me too as the reader. But you also just announced, so hey, Christmas gift for everyone out there, just in case Second Chances in Newport Stephen isn't enough. You just announced Triple Sec. Tell us about it, TJ. I'm so excited.
Yeah, Triple Sec is going to be my fourth book. It's going to come out next year, June 4th. And it's a polyamorous rom-com, which I'm extremely excited to do. It's about three people who meet and fall in love in the high-class world of the New York City cocktail scene. So there's a lot of drinks. There's a lot of I don't want to spoil it, but there's a lot of fun stuff. It's a really interesting book. I am so glad I got a chance to write something like this, because you don't see a lot of books like this in traditional publishing. So I'm incredibly excited for it.
Polyamory, I am too.
Yeah, we had to we had to do a quick little sort of, I don't know, PowerPoint presentation for some of the folks on the sales team to be like, okay, here's what polyamory is. polycule means. Here's what a metamor is. Like, it was just a little fun, down and dirty. Like, here's some quick things so that you can talk to booksellers about this. So that was fun and weird. But it wouldn't be one of my books without it being fun and weird.
And you know what? We love you for it. We genuinely do as readers, trust me. So, because I do snoop around, and again, I just want to eat up all the books. I see something, Eden's End. What's that
Yes.
about?
Eden's End is a book that's coming out in a couple of years, the year after next, from Random House. It's my first historical novel. It's a historical romance featuring a nobleman who is a trans man. Very excited for that as well. I don't want to say too much about it because it doesn't have a cover yet. It doesn't have anything yet, really, basically.
It's very, very new.
It's it is very, very not out yet. So, but I am so excited for that because I love historical romance. I love, historical fiction, period. And I've always wanted to write one. So I'm really looking forward to when that comes out. Yeah.
That's exciting. Thanks for sharing. So looking back, because now, Chef's Kiss, Chef's Choice, Readers Know and Love, I really hope they'll give Second Chances in Newport Stephen a try. Triple Sec is on the horizon, and you're also working on Eden's End. I mean, those are 5 books. You've been working. What would you tell your younger self, TJ, looking back now that you have almost 5 books, ready to, be available in the next 2 years? I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, I guess if I could talk to my younger self, first of all, I would explain the concept of non-binary genders. That would save us all a lot of time. But if that's not an option, then yeah, I mean, I always wanted to write or was writing even as a little kid just for fun. But I think, like many people, as I, grew up and had to decide like what I wanted to do as a job and a career, I honestly thought that well, it's too hard to become a writer, because it is very, very hard to become a published writer. A lot of it relies on luck. A lot of it relies on, putting in a ton of hard work that you don't know whether or not it's ever going to pay off. And I just thought well, there are so many other people out there who are probably going to be better at it than me. I may as well try to do something else. But I was really bad at everything else. I was just terrible at every other job I've ever had. As far as I am concerned, I'm sure that it was fine for most people, but it wasn't what was, it wasn't what I knew that I was good at. Because what I'm good at is this. What I'm good at is telling stories where people kiss. And I think the sooner that I could come to terms with that, the better it was. Because, I obviously had a lot of books sort of stored up in my brain, ready to kind of get out in a very, very short amount of time. So, I think that, not to be cliche or anything, but a lot of people out there believe in themselves maybe a little too much. Maybe there are some, I don't know, white men out there writing books who maybe pull it back a little bit.
Yeah.
They could. But I think for a lot of other people, they could use a little bit more encouragement. They could use a little bit more hey, actually, this is something that is doable. Actually, this is something that you can do if it's something you really want. And that's what I wish I had when I was younger, when I was a kid. I wish someone had told me oh, actually, you could do this if you want. Because I honestly didn't think I could. And then here we are. So,
that's the pronouns, and then say, hey, it's possible.
Yeah. Oh, that would be an extremely confusing meet.
I know. I'm teasing.
I'm from the future, but we don't have time for that right now.
Oh my gosh. I love it though. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think folks the rest of us, especially, yes, just not the straight white men. Their egos, in my opinion, is already too inflated. But the rest of us,
Yeah.
yeah, we could benefit from a bit of help, for sure, in believing in ourselves. So yeah, I think that's pretty solid there. Getting into your reading life, though, what books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead?
So a couple books coming out in the next year that I'm very excited about. Anita Kelly is an auto buy author for me. Their next book, How You Get the Girl, is coming out. It's a basketball sapphic romance. I am going to be excited for a sport, which is like unheard of. That's how much I'm looking forward to this book. It's like I will transform into a sports gay so that I can enjoy this book more fully.
I agree.
There's a book by C.O. Axelrod, who I love. Girls with Bad Reputations, which is a follow-up, I believe, to the first book. I could be wrong about that. It's YA, very like musical, the music world, the music industry. Love it. Can't wait for that. Um, and what was coming up soon that I was also very excited about? Edward Underhill's This Day Changes Everything, also YA, and trans, I believe. And yeah, there's so many fun books coming out in the YA space. I think that if you're, an adult reader who loves romance and loves reading diversely, then like definitely don't sleep on young adult titles, because there's some really cool stuff happening in that space that I think we should all pay attention to. So those are some things that I'm looking forward to soon ish.
Sounds amazing. So on the show, we also love indie booksellers. So share with our listeners your favorite local indie.
I got to give a shout out to a new guy in town.
Yes.
we love a new guy. Rip Bodice just opened or recently opened their Brooklyn outpost out in Park Slope. I visited many times. They have amazing events. They have an amazing curated selection. It is almost all romance books, tons and tons of cool things that a quote unquote normal bookstore would not have for you. So yeah, I love the Rip Bodice. And if you want to order Second Chances in Newport Stephen from them, I think that they would be a great place to do that from.
Love it. Amazing. So I know you said this at the top of the interview, but I'm going to ask you anyway. I know you've written the book, you've given it to us. Second Chances in Newport Stephen, it's up to readers at this point. But what are you hoping, in an ideal world, readers might think or feel after turning the last page?
I mean, I think the more books that I have under my belt and the older I get, that both are happening at the same time, the more that I kind of picture a reader in my head that, is very similar to me, is like, a person who is trans in this country right now and who just maybe needs like a nice escape or just like some outlet, some art that they can enjoy, that will in some way hopefully like see them or reflect them. I hope when that reader like closes Second Chances in Newport Stephen, they just have a little like, I don't know, like a glance up towards the ceiling or the sky and just like a nice like calming like just like let it out, girl, like I hope it does that for you. And you can be cis and maybe it does it for you too. I'm not going to judge. But yeah, I hope that there is just like a little bit of joy, a little bit of respite for people who need it.
Yes, I think it will give some much needed joy this holiday season. So readers, I really hope you will give Second Chances in Newport Stephen a go. TJ, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.